Welcome all to today's webinar on maintaining motivation. I'm Betsy Malarsic, a learning skills specialist with the Academic Resource Center at Georgetown University. It's important to name that losing motivation in your academic work is not a sign that something is wrong with you or with your work ethic. Losing motivation is a natural part of being a student, in part because of the intensity of student life. Not only are students' schedules aggressive, but competing deadlines and overworking can lead to students putting unnatural stress on both their bodies and minds. So energy levels fluctuate, and as they do, so too do passion and interest in the material. So motivation is an ebb and flow. It's constantly changing based on your current workload. So just because your motivation may be low now doesn't mean that it will be low forever. With that in mind, it can be helpful to ask yourself why you have lost motivation before trying to figure out the best approach to regaining it. Some questions to ask yourself include, am I suffering from burnout? If you've pulled 3 all-nighters in the last week, then your loss of motivation may be a sign of your body and mind being overloaded, and you may need rest in order to reconnect with that motivation. Does my work feel purposeless? If you feel disconnected from your schoolwork, then it's difficult to maintain motivation in completing the work at all. Am I bored? There's a chance that the course material is too easy, and that's why you're disengaged. On the other hand, am I overwhelmed? If the work is too difficult, or if you just have too much work to do, that can be just as debilitating. Am I having trouble connecting to the material or the professor? Sometimes a lack of motivation may be related to a single course rather than to your studies as a whole, which is also important to note. We'll start by discussing ways to boost your intrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation refers to being motivated to do something because it provides you with personal fulfillment or satisfaction. You're doing something because you want to do it rather than because something external is telling you to do it. So how can you reconnect with your academic interests when those interests have disappeared? An important question to ask yourself is, why did I choose my current academic path? Understanding your original reason for coming to Georgetown can help you reorient your current circumstances. Even if a course or assignment is uninteresting or unimportant to you, it's still a piece of a larger goal or passion area that led you to Georgetown in the first place. Reconnecting with the big picture of why you're pursuing your degree can provide meaning to the sometimes purposeless seeming minutia. So how do you reignite that academic flame? Reconnecting to the subject or to the issues that led you to Georgetown can help you regain your sense of purpose. In this sense, feeding your personal interests can actually make you a better student. So a few ways that you can reconnect with these personal interests include watching movies, listening to podcasts, reading books, or engaging in other media that relate to the subject matter. It doesn't have to be academic content to help you reconnect. It only has to be interesting. Try chatting with someone who shares your interests for these subject areas, either over coffee, during a walk, or even after class. Again, this can be a chat with someone from your academic realm, such as a TA or a professor or a classmate, but it can also be a friend, just someone who would enjoy talking about this in a way that would get you excited. You can also prioritize attending events on campus or across DC related to your subject area. Take a look at your department's upcoming events, other Georgetown events, or even the Smithsonian website or upcoming events in DC. We live in an exciting city. COVID measures are dropping and things are happening all over the city. So getting involved in those sorts of events can sometimes re-spark that interest. In regaining your academic motivation, it can also be helpful to ask yourself, when was the last time you enjoyed engaging with your academics? So thinking back to a specific scenario or situation when you were excited. So some questions to ask yourself: was there specific content that sparked your interest? Is there a skill or task that you found especially engaging? Was there an assignment that you felt personally invested in? So think about the last time you felt academic engagement and think about what piece helped you feel so engaged. And then the follow-up question, and this is the really important part, is how can you make space for those skills or that content in the upcoming month? If you have an assignment coming up, can you relate it back to that reading? Can you work in a skill that you enjoy in the course into an upcoming assignment? How can you take the piece that you've enjoyed in the past and infuse it into the next month of schoolwork? It's also important to remember that negativity breeds negativity. So with that in mind, you want to try as best as you can to shut down negative conversations that feed negative attitudes. There's a distinction here between venting and this kind of unproductive negativity. Sometimes we need to talk about our problems, including something like an uninspiring class. Doing so can help us work through our thoughts, and it can help us understand the problem better. But you want to be aware of when you cross the line from necessary venting into unhelpful complaining. There can be a certain point when talking with others about how unmotivating circumstances are can lead to a further lack of motivation. This kind of conversation can be most common amongst classmates in a similar situation. Sometimes the easiest way for you to communicate with other classmates and to connect with them is to dump on problems you're having with a class or in an assignment. And after a certain point, these conversations begin to feed that negativity rather than helping you work through it. They can be easy to return to, especially if they lead to some kind of social connection. So just to be aware of when those conversations are happening and when they leave you feeling less motivated rather than more motivated. And keep that in mind next time you engage in conversation with that particular person. And instead try to turn the conversation into a more positive vein. So even if you have the best intentions of reconnecting with your intrinsic motivation, you may still need structures to help you get there. That's where extrinsic motivation comes in. Extrinsic motivation refers to outside factors that encourage you to reach your goals. So one of the best ways to increase your motivation is to make progress on your work, and these tips can help you do that. So how do you do this? One way to jumpstart your productivity is to start with something small each day. By starting your day out by making progress, you'll set a productive tone for the rest of the day that will help you feel accomplished. So doing something right away can lead to a more motivated, more productive day. The approach for doing this is start by selecting a small, interesting piece of your work that can be done in under 10 minutes. The idea is to choose something easy, not something complete. This might mean reading 5 pages of a book, brainstorming for an essay, maybe even looking through your notes. Whatever you choose, it should be simple. Prioritize doing the small task first thing in the morning before anything else. You might do this task while drinking your morning coffee or eating breakfast. But again, it should be something quick, brief, and something that will just get you started. Sometimes the hardest part of making progress is to start your task, and that's the goal of this approach. So if you can choose something interesting, then that will make this even easier. And again, don't prioritize doing something complete, prioritize doing something quick. I even used as an example, read 5 pages of a book. It could be read 1 page of a book. Just having that goal accomplished right away, it's going to make it easier to return to that goal later in the day. You can also use apps to spark engagement. Phones are pretty commonly seen as a source of distraction because they draw your attention away from academics. But what if those distractions could help you become more engaged in your work? Spend some time on the App Store looking at productivity apps and allow yourself to play, to have fun, to get engaged. A lot of these apps are designed to make you regain interest in your work. So next time you are procrastinating, go on the App Store and look for some productivity specific apps. So there are 3 categories that I find most helpful. To-do lists are a great one. The one I have pictured here is Rocket 135 that asks you to come up with 1 major task for each day, 3 medium tasks for each day, and 5 little tasks for each day. Habit trackers can be super helpful because they are an engagement platform that asks you to check in every single day to connect with the goals that you've set for yourself. The one I have pictured here is Habitica, in which you have a video game-esque character who, based on whether or not you complete your habits, will gain life or lose life. And this is one that you can connect with friends over, so you can compete to see who's the strongest. Internet blockers can also be fun. The one pictured here is Forest, which is quite popular, and you can essentially have the app block the internet on your phone while you're planting a tree. And if you go on your phone, the tree will die. You can also connect with friends on this one. So if anyone in your study session kills the tree, everyone knows. So if you want more app ideas, we definitely have a webinar from the past called Apps for Focus available on the webinar webpage. But again, this is something that is fun, but can help you regain that interest. So follow the fun. It's also worth asking yourself if you do better with digital or physical planners. I just mentioned a whole lot of digital tools, but you can also engage with a physical planner, and some people find these more fun. The digital ones are often free. All of the ones I just mentioned were free except for Forest, which Forest has a free counterpart called Flora, very similar. But physical planners, sometimes you need to spend money. That's one reason I tend to highlight apps more, but physical planners can be just as fun. A lot of them come with stickers. A lot of them have sort of passion questions. I use the word passion because Passion Planner is a particular brand that does have free templates available online. So using a fun planner can again help you get engaged in the work just by nature of setting up the planner, which is a more fun activity. So we're going to get into questions in a minute, and we actually have some questions that were submitted ahead of time. Before that, I wanted to mention our next 2 webinars, which will be the last 2 webinars of the semester. On April 26th, we have Getting Organized for Finals. This is going to be a time for you to figure out your plan for how you want to approach all of your final assignments. And then we also have a finals co-working session coming up right before study days. And this will be a time that we will sit down and work together. So bring your work. We'll have some study tips and use time study blocks to kind of work through some of this content. So we're going to move on to questions. And if you have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat. But a few were submitted before the webinar, so we're going to start with those. So first question is, when going through finals, how do we stay level-headed when we know that we are not performing well while taking exams? With staying level-headed, there are a lot of different answers to this question, but I think it's important to note that often mental anxiety and physical anxiety are related. So when you begin to be stressed out mentally, sometimes that leads to you having physical effects. So your heart might start racing, your breathing might get more intense, and that can all happen just because of the level of mental anxiety you have. So with that in mind, a good approach can be to try to temper your physical state in order to ease the mental anxiety. So doing very slow and intentional breathing can be helpful. Sometimes counting your breaths in and out can be helpful because the counting gives your mind something different to focus on. It's also important to note that this kind of anxiety is going to be worse if you're not taking care of yourself, which sort of goes back to the beginning of this presentation where I was introducing motivation. Loss of motivation is sometimes a reaction to burnout. Again, sometimes when you're tired, when you're worn out, you're going to be more anxious and less productive. So knowing that you have this kind of attitude sometimes, a good way to combat that is to eat healthy food and sleep intentionally before exams. So I think it can be helpful when you're in a place of just freaking out and not being productive to start by just looking at your physical health. If you have so much work that you know that you're not going to be able to complete it all and do well, but a good approach to that might be to say, first things first, I'm going to start getting 8 hours of sleep every night. First things first, I'm going to start drinking water regularly. So starting with that can be really helpful. You can also always make a meeting with the ARC, send us an email at arc@georgetown.edu. You can set up a meeting with me and we can just kind of go through your finals plan together. We also have a past webinar on not maintaining motivation, that's this one, managing anxiety, which could be helpful as well. I also just wanted to note that there's a comment in the chat about a super effective bullet journal, House of Routine. I haven't seen that one before, but I am going to check that out because I love journals. This is a technique that I use a lot, obviously. I get excited about work I don't want to do by just coming up with fun journal plans, but it works for me. So the next question we have is, how can I maintain motivation as a young American who hears about global and domestic atrocities every day while feeling powerless on driving change, even in our future careers? That is a great question and something that a lot of us, I think, are managing right now, especially when it seems like there's something new every day in the news. And I also think it's worth noting that our computer algorithms learn to keep giving us more and more negative content. So one thing that's important to name with this is that news media, and then just kind of related to that, internet is counterproductive to the work that you need to do. So trying as best you can to separate those two. That means checking in with the news at a time that isn't your work time. So it can be helpful with that in mind to schedule your kind of daily news check-ins for times when you have something distracting afterwards. Maybe doing a news check-in 30 minutes before class. So if you're still upset 30 minutes later, then you go to class and you have something to kind of take your mind off of it a little bit. A lot of my suggestions for approaching this is around scheduling. So just as you want to separate your kind of news check-ins from your work time, you also want to try to schedule your work time after some other activity or event where you might be in a more mentally well state. So that might mean scheduling study blocks for immediately after class, scheduling study blocks for after you're going to the gym, scheduling them for after having dinner with friends. I think the really important piece here, though, is to try to separate news from work as much as possible, because otherwise the negativity will make it hard to move forward. I had a slide earlier about negativity breeding negativity, and I was talking about it in terms of conversations with others, but this is also true with just when we're reading the news and we're in our own space, that negativity builds in our minds. So if you can follow up those periods of introspection with something that will allow you to communicate with others, then kind of having those spaces where you're not just caught up in your own thoughts before you do your work might make you more productive. But it's definitely a challenge. It's an important time it's always good to be aware of what's happening, and that's especially important now, but trying as best you can to stay away from that information while you're doing work and to surround your information check-ins with some kind of activity that will help provide you with support. And then the third question we had was, what if you've been feeling unmotivated for a very long time, such as a year plus? I would say that if you have been feeling unmotivated for that long of a time, that it may relate to kind of the earlier question of what brought you to Georgetown and how connected do you feel to the work that you originally set out to do. So it might mean reconsidering what path you want to take. That might mean changing your major. That might mean considering your career path. Definitely, if this is something you've been considering, reach out to resources, because there are a lot of good resources for this. This might mean that setting up a talk with the Career Center could be helpful. This might mean that setting up a talk with your advisor could be helpful. Again, you can always come check in with me at the Academic Resource Center, arc@georgetown.edu. But if you've been feeling unmotivated for that long, it might mean rethinking the big picture. Because a lot of my advice here was, how can you reconnect with the big picture? And if you feel like the big picture has changed, that doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It might just mean that you have changed and shifted as a person, that you need to refocus a little bit in terms of what you're studying. I also want to name that with feeling unmotivated, you should look at the other things in your life that do motivate you. So I worked with a student in the past who felt very unmotivated by her schoolwork, but was super motivated by her community service commitments and her social work commitments. And to be honest, I felt that as a positive, because the academic commitments are short term and the the community service and social work commitments were something that could turn into a career. So it just meant to a certain extent that there was a bit of shifting to the next stage of life. So thinking about what else in your realm is motivating you can help you figure out that big picture. It may also relate back to that idea I was talking about with the connection between mind and body. So if all of the suggestions I made don't feel like they resonate with that particular question, it might just be a matter of trying to work in an exercise routine. That even sounded very ambitious. Sometimes a really helpful thing can just be going outside for a 5-minute walk every day. Because a lot of our current environment involves staying inside a lot, and which means that we're not getting sufficient vitamin D, which actually helps us with focus and makes us feel better. Also wear sunscreen, but sometimes just making sure you're getting outside for 5 minutes every day and drinking enough water. Little physical changes like that can help as well. So you want to try something to mix it up, but sometimes starting with that physical self-care can lead to the emotional self-care because the two are related. If you have any other questions, please add them to the chat. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me today. Good luck with the next month, and go for a walk sometime, if not today because it's rainy, sometime tomorrow, and take care of yourselves.